Okay, so the idea that at one point there was a group like MJ-12, maybe a group like it, if not that group.
MJ-12? I don't think I'm familiar with that.
So the story is that back in the 40s, Eisenhower put together a group, and they called it Majestic-12. And the names of these people are they're historically documented, and there's supposedly these papers that came out describing that they were tasked with taking the whole UFO thing and managing the information and sequestering it away and managing, which involved burying it to the point where nobody was accountable. So they created this whole organization. Now, people will debate the existence of MJ-12. It's a hotly debated subject. The papers that came out people still to this day debate their authenticity. But it makes sense that if you're the government in the 40s and 50s and you've got evidence of something that you don't understand that's crashed, you're going to put together at the highest level a group of scientists and military people and intelligence people to look at this and manage it and decide how to disperse it to the public, if at all. So if there wasn't an MJ-12, a simple thought experiment would lead you to the point where there must have been somebody. Because you don't have a craft of unknown origins crash in the desert and then you just don't look into it.
Yeah, and it has to be, like, my thought, I think, is in line with most people's thoughts. Like, it has to be something like an amalgamation. It has to be something separate. It's not like, oh, the CIA's on this, or like, oh, the NSA's on this. Like, there has to, I'm not saying that there aren't people in those organizations who are like read in and a part of it. In fact, I'll bet that literally is the case.
That's pretty much describing what I've been able to find out.
Right? So it has to be some sort of like group of individuals that are that are clear to be read in on this and work in tandem together secretly. And, covering up secrets like this, that's something that's really hard for me to concept, because I can't imagine having that information.
So you got Roswell. The Roswell Daily Record spills the story, General Ramey, or flying saucer. Then the next day, it was a weather balloon. Okay, there was a group that was responsible for that about face, and was responsible for that whole story changing and being buried, and all whatever was found at Roswell, whether it was alien or whatever, we never saw it. The weather balloon is pretty much debunked completely. So an organization formed to do that. The first thing they decided was that, well, we can't go public with this. So we've got to keep it a secret. So now these guys have free reign in the early days of government to do whatever. They're accountable to nobody except the president. And their job is figure out what to do with this information, figure out what to do with the stuff we've recovered. And their decision was, we can't tell the public for any number of reasons. And now we got to look into this technology. And so it didn't go to the front-facing military. It didn't go to the halls of Congress, although a lot of people say some of it ended up in the basement, maybe. It went into top secret rooms where they had conversations about, hey, we found this. Can you look into what that might be? And it could be everything from an intact craft to a piece of technology to a piece of metal to a piece of materials. Any of those things. So over time, with zero accountability, lots of black budget money, and compartmentalization where very few people knew the whole picture. So you could be a colonel. Let's say somebody's sitting on top of this whole thing, and they know the entire story. They're the ones that put this group together. How many of those people are there? Not many.
No.
3 or 4. You're called into these guys' office, and you're handed a piece of something, and you're told to take it to Lockheed Martin. So you take it to Lockheed Martin. Now, how many people in that chain know anything about where this stuff came from that is provable? Nobody. Now, you fast forward 50 years when these guys are all gone, and all that remains is the remnants of these programs and legends about where this stuff came from. Is there some kind of repository where all these records are kept? Maybe, but who knows where it is?
See, I don't know where the line gets drawn. That's the other problem here. Like, where is it? Where do these individuals, whoever they are, figure out that, hey, anything at any point, even in the future, like let's say they're saying even 300 years from now or something like that, anything past this line, we can never talk about. What makes them decide that? To me, this is just where my head goes, not to go like too far with it, but it means they're here and they've been here. And it's the kind of thing where if we actually had the information shared with the public, people would riot in the streets or kill themselves or whatever they're going to do, because it means it's like the end times are here. That's the only thing I can come up with that makes sense. And then when you start to think that, you're like, well, am I a crazy person too? I don't think so, but other people could say that, you know?
Well, the idea that there's been some kind of presence of a non-human or even alternative human species here on the planet that we don't know about, that's pretty much not hard to dismiss, that they've been here through all of recorded history. In Accidental Truth, we have a guy that has come forward in the film for the first time ever admitting that he was running 30 and 40 years ago a secret government program studying this stuff.
Who was this guy?
Alexander in the film. Mm. And he talks about how that these things have been with us for all of recorded history, and that flying saucers are absolutely real, and that our sensors picked them up from time to time up to a mile wide, he said that he's seen.
I think I had him mixed up. Who was the guy who was, because you and I talked about this last night, who was the guy who was basically just a middleman, though? Like,
well, I think that was Alexander. I think that there was in the time when he came in, and Colonel John Alexander, for people who don't know, he was involved in a lot of esoteric government programs. They studied life after death. They studied non-lethal weapons technology, mind control. He was supposedly involved in what was that program that they did where they were doing mind control experiments on people?
MK Ultra?
Yeah, he was involved in MK Ultra.
He was the guy who was like the subject of Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah, they made that movie, and he was Kevin Spacey's character supposedly was after him. And he was also fictionalized in a book called Out There by a New York Times writer. But at any rate, Alexander's military record, what we do know and can prove, this guy was ultimately, if there was ever a guy that could tell you but he'd have to kill you, it might have been John. Mm. And for years he would say that, there's no government program studying UFOs. In recent time, he's come out and said, well, that's not exactly true. There was, and I was actually running one of them. And we've been able to find this evidence. But he will tell you, and he does in the movie, maybe for the first time ever, that we've been studying these things for a long time. And the stuff that Lou Elizondo's group found, and he says this too in the film, they were studying craft doing the exact same thing 30, 40 years ago. And it's the same group that has surfaced through TTSA, the Hal Puthoffs, the people like that came up through Tom DeLonge's organization in 2017. These are the same guys that have been involved in these programs going all the way back 30, 40 years.
What's that called? To the Stars?
To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. Yeah. But back to the original question as to how this stuff could get sequestered. After a while, nobody knows the whole story. The classified documents have been either filed away where nobody knows where they're at or destroyed. The reason that the information is not getting out, if you give something, say just a military officer went to Lockheed Martin with some material that is non-earthly or of unknown origin and said, see what this is, what you can do with it. Well, Lockheed goes, oh, wow, this stuff causes, if you bend it just right, you can have invisibility, or if you do this with it, you can defy radar, or, look at this stuff. You can crinkle it up and it folds back out to its original shape. Let's figure that out. Well, now all of a sudden you've got something that a corporation is in possession of that becomes a trade secret that they are not going to share with anybody. And so there's a lot of reason to believe that a whole bunch of stuff ended up in that category. And it's free from Freedom of Information Act requests. It's free from the prying eyes of the public.
But the government, they don't care about that, right?
Well, it's kind of like a government-industry partnership.
Yeah, but like
See, no longer is the government accountable for this. Once it goes into the private corporation, it goes from a classified program into a corporation. There's no Freedom of Information Act accountability. There's nothing.
Okay. All right.
And so now this has been the whole stuff about crash debris retrievals and analysis and back engineering research. That is all in compartments and stovepipes throughout a huge amount of companies that are accountable not to the public at all. And the fact that these programs even exist has been covered up at the deepest levels because these guys that started all this within government were accountable to nobody in the very beginning. And over time, they've been given so much money and so much black budget money and so much lack of accountability that we have no idea what's going on. And the idea that there's somebody sitting on top of all this right now that knows everything about everything UFO related in some secret office in the basement of the Pentagon, I used to think that that was probably true, and now I'm not so sure.